This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon.
Not sure if you saw the headline, but CNN, the most trusted name in news, is putting up a paywall. Well, here's the thing behind the thing on that. CNN isn't building a paywall, it's waving a white flag. Let's start with the obvious. The network that Ted Turner built doesn't need the money that a paywall would generate. If it did need the money, the CNN Plus project would have been a smarter approach. CNN Plus gave people something they didn't get on CNN. It gave people additional content, additional characters, the stuff people would have grabbed onto were they interested in grabbing on. But that project failed before it started because there was too little interest. So if CNN was struggling, then CNN Plus was giving the public more of what it didn't want. Paywalls make sense for newspapers, not TV networks, not cable TV networks. TV networks like CNN never faced these dilemmas. TV money is much bigger than print money, as its advertising space is much more valuable and its audience is much bigger. Simply put, CNN doesn't need the pennies that the paywall would generate. And it has no reason to assume that its large audience is also a loyal audience, eager to pay for what it gets now for free. About 15 years ago, the Detroit News and Free Press made a false choice between print dollars and online pennies. They chased the pennies. They ended 7-day home delivery, even though print at that time drove 95% of their revenues. But the online product back then was still free, and this was bad for business. So for about the last 5 years, the paywall trend has hit local news across America. Today, if you want to read a once-in-a-lifetime headline out of Wichita, Kansas, you'll be asked to give an email address and pay $1. There's hardly any just clickable news anymore. Everyone wants something out of you after so many years of getting nothing. This, of course, is an overreaction to a bad dynamic. For decades, papers in Detroit and Wichita offered their product online for free. Their goal was to build a big enough audience to command the digital advertising pennies that they were chasing. It wasn't until many years later that they realized they created a bad habit in the marketplace. By giving away their work, newspapers conditioned their readers to view their work as free, and worse, as worthless, as something closer to a public service than the profit motive. Today, this logic still exists when readers demand that coverage of COVID or a huge storm or a presidential debate be exempt from the paywall on the grounds that the public has a right to know. The newspaper, just happy that someone values its work enough to demand this, typically gives in. Newspapers dug this hole for themselves. Giving stories away for free online also devalued their print product, which was still the moneymaker back then. It put readers in an uncomfortable choice. If I can read today's news for free online, why would I pay $5 tomorrow for yesterday's news when it appears in print? It makes no sense. And it was the print customer who was the biggest loser in all this. Today, both Detroit newspapers are as thin as a leaflet. When people don't get their Sunday paper, they're routed to a phone number that's inside the Detroit News newsroom. Then they're given the number to a customer service line that everybody knows nobody will respond to until at least Monday. So if you don't get your Sunday paper delivered, you probably won't get it same day unless you run to the store yourself. Every year, the paper seems to lose another page and cost another quarter. When I was at the Detroit News, I called this the death spiral. That's when the product keeps getting worse and more expensive at the same time. This kills its value proposition to all but the oldest of readers, all but the elderly people who still like the feel of a print newspaper in their hand. Well, when those people die, what kind of audience is going to be left? Whoever replaces those elders, chances are they won't value the news product the way those old people did the print newspaper. chances are they won't spend money on news the way those elders did in subscribing to the print paper. And so the paywall for the local newspaper was an attempt to dig out of this hole. There's a newfound obsession in local news with asking for your email address to unlock stories. That's another offshoot of the paywall mentality. You basically can't read in 2024 a Washington Post story without either being a subscriber, giving them $1, giving them an email address, or some configuration of the above. Everybody's obsessed with building user lists because that's data, and data can be sold, often for more than news is worth. It's been said that if a product is free, the audience is what's being sold. Well, that described the news business until about 5 minutes ago. It worked until it didn't. Unfortunately, after 15 years of free newspaper stories, it's tough to reverse course. It's a bit like letting a kid swear as a child, then trying to crack down when they're a teenager. By that point, the die is cast. By that point, the dynamic is set. The best time to address a problem is today. The next best time is tomorrow. 15 years later, it's always going to be hard to play catch up. So we can forgive the newspaper for its paywalls. But man, do those details matter. This week, the Detroit News and Free Press did a flash sale. They're offering 1-month subscriptions for, I kid you not, for 10 cents. When my friend sent me this, I thought it was some kind of joke. I actually texted the Patriot Post girl right after I got that and said, was this you? Is this you kind of pulling our leg? Is this you having a laugh? Like, it can't be real, right? They weren't saying $10 for 1 month. They weren't saying $1 for a month. 10 cents. 10 pennies. Plus tax, I imagine. My problem with the Detroit papers is not that they have a paywall. They needed it long ago. My problem is that they've let their paywall turn into a humiliation ritual rather than a driver of revenue. They asked for $1 for 6 months, 25 cents for 2 months, 10 cents for 1 month. By the time a new president is inaugurated in January, they'll damn near be paying you to read the Detroit News. This is not the way you signal to people that they're blessed to be reading the best news outlet in Michigan. Low prices send the wrong message. They devalue the work of your reporting staff. A too low price is actually worse than offering your product for free and getting that email address, because the low price opens your product to ridicule. It creates the impression of low value among your readers. They sit in meetings all day on Fort Street, where the Detroit News and Free Press are headquartered, but somehow no one sees this obvious point, that something marked cheap will be viewed as cheap. As a practical matter, the papers are basically negotiating against themselves at this point. If yesterday I could get a 6-month subscription for $1, and today I can get 1 month for 10 cents, why wouldn't I just wait it out for tomorrow and see what that deal is? Someday it seems like there's going to come a month without a paywall at all, and I can save my dime. Over at the Free Press, it's been months now since they got rid of their comment section. My friend Patriot Post Girl and I used to do a hashtag on Twitter about this called No Comment. It was our way of ridiculing Michigan's biggest newspaper for walling itself off from reality. Just 30 years before the Detroit Free Press was founded in 1837, news was delivered orally in Detroit. You've probably heard of the town crier. Yeah, that was an actual thing, and its roots in Detroit originated in the Catholic Church. Before Michigan was a state, the Freep was a paper. And now their Freep is approaching 190 years in Detroit, and at that grand old age, it decided to turn off its hearing aid. It decided to stop listening to its community by turning off its comment section. And really, it's you to blame. They're too loud. Sometimes you say the wrong thing. Sometimes you poke holes in narratives. Sometimes you point out that stories are narratives rather than news, and this turns off other readers who see it. And sometimes the truth hurts. So what did the Freep do? It silenced its readers. Don't comment on the article you're reading when the thought strikes you, as you've been doing since message boards in the 1990s. No, instead, you should act like it's the 70s. You should send your letter to the editor, who will then pick and choose which voices can be heard. Forget about using your words. You must submit to the gatekeeper. When a news outlet develops tiny ears, as the Free Press has, it's no longer in the news business. It's a propaganda shop. Beware any news outlet that doesn't care what we think as the public. There's a reason so many of my criticisms of the Michigan media have centered around the Detroit News. It's because it's the only paper in Detroit worth a damn. A decade ago, when I was supposedly competing with the Free Press, I came to realize we weren't actually in the same business. See, over at the News, we were telling news stories, and we took great pride in telling the reader things they didn't know before waking up that day. Over at the Free, they were writing term papers. They were doing projects where the ending is written before the reporting began. On daily news, they were often nowhere to be found, and today, many years later, daily news is still their biggest weakness. Everybody at the Freep envisions themselves as a superstar who is above such things. Freep either pulls you in with one strong project these days, or more likely, as is often the case, it has nothing to offer you at all. There's no middle ground, and typically there's no depth beyond the one good story. It's one and done. Rather than tell the truth, too often reporters at the Freep tell their truth, or what they wish were true. And so, approaching 190 years of age, the Freep has never been less interested in serving its readers or in hearing from its readers. Never has a paper so large and so well funded been as easy to ignore as the Detroit Free Press. And that brings me back to CNN. CNN's not creating a paywall. That's the thing, and that's a surface level analysis. The thing behind the thing is CNN is hiding its work from its audience. It doesn't need the pennies that it will now beg for. Ad money from Big Pharma alone is massive. It doesn't need to build an email list or sell data to someone else. So if CNN's paywall isn't about money, what is it about? CNN has created a paywall for the same reason the Freep turned off comments. They're scared of their audience. They're scared how little control and sway they have over their audience. CNN sees its stories being shared around the internet with ridicule attached. The Freep saw readers picking its work apart for other readers to see in the comment section. And so in October 2024, just a month before the most important election of our lives, the gatekeepers are failing badly. Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, put on a debate masterclass by taking on Tim Walz and two girl bosses from CBS News. If the Trump-Harris debate looked lopsided in Harris's favor, Vance made the 3-on-1 dynamic look unfair in his favor. If you were to take the brain power of Walz and the two girl bosses, it would have taken 20, 30 such people to equal what J.D. Vance did last night. He was just that good. So twice in a month's time, more or less, the media has tried to stack the deck at debates in favor of Democrats. And twice they failed on live TV shows they control, with all of America watching. After the 2020 election, the left couldn't help itself. The blue team took a victory lap in the pages of Time magazine and bragged about how they had fortified the election. This involved the help of every official institution that Americans know and trust, from government offices to businesses that you respect to public interest groups that sway opinion. They were all in it together, and boy, they sure pulled a fast one. They convinced 81 billion people, or is it 81 trillion, that Orange Man bad, and they got Biden into the White House. Congrats, guys, you won. But 4 years later, when they go to reach for those same levers, all they find are worn down little nubs. And when those levers are pulled, they either don't work, as in the Trump-Harris debate, or they backfire, as in the Walz-Vance debate. Nothing they do works anymore. So what do? Do you rebuild trust? Do you admit that you tipped the scales for too long and promise to do better? Do you take the only smart approach to political coverage, which is when there's two teams, you should cover them both pretty hard? You should be skeptical of everybody at all times. Do you do that? Or do you keep your little blue team advocacy ring going and limit the reach of outsiders? You do what CNN and the Freep did. You build a paywall and you wave the white flag.